Dunkin' Donuts, what can I get for you?
Can I get a large hot tea, extra cream, extra sugar,
Okay.
and a sausage and egg?
Sausage, no cheese on a plain bagel.
That's correct.
All right. That's it for you today?
That's it.
You can put for it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. 6:38.
Am I just coming here too much?
Yeah.
Gotta get my morning breakfast. Apparently, I better start cooking. I'm going there a bit too much. It's 46 degrees out, but sunny. I like it. Eat a little something, get to the gym. But I did an interview with someone regarding a trip to the heavens, and I think you're really gonna enjoy this one. Trying to return to a life that just really isn't the same. You know, either the person changed or the people around that person changed. But either way, his separation from them just sort of led to a lot of things in the life that just couldn't be, returned to normal, if you will. So unfortunately, it's just a lot of trying to get back to what once was, and that's not something that's easy to do. It's not something that's easy for people to deal with, and it's a tough road, a tough hill to climb, and we're gonna see how it turns out. But the good thing is I did have someone that I talked to about it. They had some questions, and I think you're gonna enjoy this one. Let me know what you think about this one.
So today we're gonna be talking about a short story called "A Trip to the Heavens."
Yes, sir.
And I'm sitting here with the author, Mr. Rolando Russell.
It's me.
And when we getting started, I just want to. I just really like the way you started out the story. And I'm just gonna read a short piece from it,
Sure.
and then ask for you to expound on what was on your mind when you was putting it together.
I can do that.
So it says, he flicked the lighter and the flame began to dance in the wind. It was dressed in an orange-blue dress and allowed the wind to lead the way. He watched the dance for a minute, forgot everything else. He was amazed at the graceful movement and the ease with which it made its directional changes. What was on your mind when you decided to open up the story in that way?
So I'll be honest with you. Typically, I sometimes just start writing. Sometimes I put a title down and then kind of let it take shape. In this case, I had in my mind a vision of flame, and I remember seeing flame in different colors. Right? Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's blue, and for some reason, it just seems as though it's just gracefully dancing in the wind, and it just made sense as you read further into the story, just to contrast just that beauty against all the darkness that's in the life of the character.
So I suppose that's the reason why you tried to give the flame like a gender, because you said an orange-blue dress. So I'm assuming that you try to say that it was like a beautiful female that was just, I guess the protagonist in the story was just mesmerized by the dress and the way that it was flowing. Is there any significance for why you made it a female as opposed to having the flame represent some type of anger, or have like a male
Rage.
character?
Absolutely. So in this particular story, without sort of going too far
Mm-hmm.
ahead, but in this story, the female represents what the character actually lost. So him actually looking at the flame is sort of like a reminiscing moment for him to look back at the two women that actually meant something to him. So it's the last opportunity, so to speak, for him to look back at the women who have had some meaningful impact on his life.
Right, and it seems like for him to be mesmerized by the flame, for me, as I was reading it, you know, it made me believe that maybe this was the character's first encounter with this drug
Okay.
that, you know, he was going to take, because for him to be, you know, mesmerized by it, you know, it's like, you know, for me, like maybe he was thinking twice on should I do this or shouldn't I do this. So I think that, you know, you did a really great job in pointing that out.
Yeah.
Now, speaking about the females that the character lost in his life,
Yes.
without giving too much of the story, there's a part in the story where it talks about a small child, where this person, you know, goes back to a time in their life
Yeah.
where, you know, he sees a woman and then he sees a small child and he has to decide
Yeah.
whether, you know, like what are they doing here, you know, and he eventually, you know, he had to take those people out.
Right.
But then also later on in the story, it talks about the character's wife and the character's daughter. So is there any correlation between those Vietnamese, the woman and the child, and his own wife and his own child, daughter?
Absolutely, and purposely done. I think
okay.
that in that situation, you know, when he's thinking back, not when it's actually happened, but when he's thinking back, it's a reflection of what his life is, sort of the turn that his life has taken. He has lost his own family, so to speak. So in this case, when he reflects back, he sort of hesitates because, you know, to him, you know, those are like the individuals that sort of represent what was beautiful in his life. So to see, you know, those two characters show up in such a dark moment of his life, you know, just sort of signified, you know, what he's currently going through, even though he's reflecting on it. You know, both situations are such that are dark in his life. So, as you stated, you know, unfortunately, he was forced to have to make a decision. But if you recall, he sort of hesitated at one point to say, "This just doesn't seem right. Like in all of this chaos, this doesn't belong here."
Right.
And so he unfortunately had to take, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, had to
Right.
take the necessary steps.
So also in this story, it seems like the character, he loses control of his life and his destiny, and you know, it seems like he's trying to seek back that control, and I guess his way of doing so is engaging in, you know, these with these drugs. Is there any correlation with the drugs and the war and the military and everything? I mean, were you trying to highlight, you know, some of the plights that some of our veterans have when they come
Absolutely.
back to the States?
That's exactly
Might feel
what-
they're abandoned.
No, yeah, and through this character's eyes, you know, and I know that this would touch on a personal level to many people. And what this character went through is what many go through. Some maybe not to the extent that this character went through it, but you know, everything from drug use to suicide to, you know, PTSD and all the other elements that we hear of. I mean, ultimately, this is just a person that, you know, went away of his own, you know, choice to try to make better for the people who ultimately ended up leaving him. So he just couldn't cope with that, and I don't know that he came to terms with the fact that he was the one that essentially had changed, but on a broader level, the war changed him.
Mm-hmm.
So he can't account for who he is today, but unfortunately, that person who he developed as a result of leaving and fighting this war sort of created the person who he is, to which he can't cope with his family at the time. So, but that's all too common of a story that we see more and more prevalent, and unfortunately, you know, we have individuals such as this character that just aren't able to get back to society. In some cases, you know, you might hear about cases where some folks actually re-enlist just to get back to that military style of life because they can't cope with the civilian style of life, having gone through the things that they've gone through.
Yeah, I think that was a real interesting, perspective in the story. Another thing that stood out for me, it seems like the character seemed to be like a masochist.
Okay.
Like it seemed like he was getting in his own way.
Yeah.
And he was trying to put the blame on other folks, but in all actuality, it really was him getting in his own way, and because he talks about being abandoned and how people weren't out there for him and how he really just wanted to be left alone. He didn't like people.
Right.
But ultimately, at the end of the story, it seems as if, because he got what he wanted, where he went to this isolated place and he was so reclusive, he's blaming those circumstances on for his situation. You know what I'm saying? So what do you have to say about that?
I think that he is unfortunately his frame of mind was framed when he left and returned. So part of it, you could understand in terms of what he had to go through, and now what he understands life to be after going through what he went through. So to an extent, you could understand, him feeling the way he feels. But then it's difficult to understand people having gone through what he's been through, because you don't know who you can trust. Especially earlier, you mentioned the story about the woman and the child, and although they may look as though they were trustworthy, they couldn't be trusted either. So now he's in society where all of that seems to culminate, and it's like, who can I trust? So he feels the only person ultimately he can trust is himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't want to be around, people, because the people who he did trust, even prior to leaving, aren't around anymore. Right? So they somehow lost trust in him to be the person he used to be. So now, really, ultimately, he only has himself.
Thanks for that answer.
Yeah.
There's this other piece later in the story that I thought to be very profound, and then it's really towards the end after the main character goes through all of these different changes or what have you, and it reads, he held the lighter in his hand. He flicked it and watched the flame begin to dance again. He held the picture, and he's referring to the picture of his wife and his daughter that he held inside of the breast pocket. So he held the picture over the flame. The smile on their faces seemed to turn into laughter. He smirked when they were engulfed in flames. So what does that piece of the story speak to the psychology of the character at that point in time?
So at that point, you got to remember, he has already taken some preliminary drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they started to take effect, and he started to come down a little bit. But then kind of the thing that he held on to the most was that picture. When he was away at war, when he came back, that's all he fought for. And to him it was, the reason I was doing this was because of, these people in this picture. And I think the reality hit that, those people obviously didn't view him the same, or knew him in the same manner. So at that point, it kind of just sort of culminated his decision making. He had already decided, let me find an isolated place.
Mm-hmm.
Let me find somewhere where, life does not exist. The wind didn't blow. The sun didn't shine. And even though laughter is supposed to be an affectionate reaction that people emote in some way or another, to him, he took it more on a personal level, because these same people no longer cared for him. So when he looked at the picture, it was more not so much that they're laughing with him, like maybe when the picture was actually taken,
right.
but more now laughing at who he'd become.
Right, so it's like a paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a great technique.
But then, as you notice in there, he also, he smirked. That it's almost, the smirk was almost more of a reminiscence of a time when, man, like that, right? They smile, and he's like, wow. Like that day is long gone.
Right. And when you're talking about the environment that he was looking for someplace that's like desolate and isolated and or what have you, you know, I think that kind of speaks to how he was feeling at the point in time. So he was looking for, you know, a place that kind of represented
where he was and who he was,
in
right?
his life.
Nothing.
Right.
Like he had no meaning,
Right.
in life to anyone.
Exactly.
So much so that he felt that, you know, his ending of his life meant nothing to nobody, right?
Mhm.
So his only gift was to be able to take his own trip, if that makes sense.
Right. And the last thing that I wanted to discuss, towards the end of the story, I guess he takes his last hit where he starts, you know, seeing rainbows and unicorns or what have you, and it mentions, I'll read it. It says he was on a roller coaster with a lot of colorful images. He rode a rainbow into the sky and then climbed aboard a white horse that floated in midair. The horse threw its head back and galloped towards the moon. He didn't make the trip. So what did you have in mind for that piece? I mean, was that written in a way to signify that, you know, he died, or did you write it to say that, you know, the drug wasn't strong enough, like he wasn't really feeling the effects? Like, what was on your mind?
So there's a double meaning.
Okay.
If you think back to the title, right, The Trip to the Heavens. So in the direct way, yes, he did pass, and his hope is that he's going to heaven, right? The other meaning of it is a trip, which is a term used, I don't know, maybe in the 60s or 70s when people tripped off of drugs. So it's a literal trip to the heavens, if that makes sense. Okay. But to go back to the actual line itself, where it says he didn't make the trip, he, as you stated, he was enjoying, you know, all the beautifulness of life, right? Its colors and so on. But he actually closed his eyes, heart stopped, mind stopped working prior to him actually reaching that goal, which was his intention, right? Let me try to get there. I'm traveling to the moon. I'm getting to the stars. I'm traveling through clouds. But the journey ended prior to him being able to enjoy it to its fullest. So the drugs actually took place and achieve his ultimate goal,
right,
of dying.
That's deep. That's a profound
Thank you.
Piece of work right there.
I appreciate that.
I look forward to reading some more of your stories.
Thank you.
And till next time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Willie or Elmore.
Sometimes you gotta tell them, get the hell out the kitchen and watch me work. Just gotta put the pasta, and then it's time to go. I hope you enjoyed that piece. Pretty touching piece. It was, you know, it really touched me as I was writing it. I'm sure we all know or have heard of someone who returns from, you know, serving this country in one of the branches of the military, and, you know, comes back with some issues, you know, and sometimes, you know, we as friends and family members don't really know how to react. But we should remain open and just sort of be there for that person. A lot of things can happen, so we do our best to try to avoid some of those things. But hopefully you enjoyed the story. It's a pretty deep story. It's a touching story, as much as I enjoyed it while I was writing it. Today is MLK Day, King Day, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So just a shout out to all of those who are out on the front lines fighting for social injustice and human rights, equality, diversity, and inclusion of all people. So continue that fight, and, you know, eventually we will win.